You only have to glance at the Mini John Cooper Works to see that it's a bit unhinged. It's got these bizarre wheel arch covers here, and at the back, a massive wing. But unhinged is one thing, good is something else altogether.
Before we get stuck in, have you subscribed to the CarGurus YouTube channel? Go on, tap that subscribe button.
This is the third Mini GP in the series, and it's the maddest of the lot. It's also one of the maddest cars on sale, full stop. There's the way it looks, for one thing, the fact it has no rear seats, and the fact that this is the fastest Mini so far.
The eye-catching aero kit helps to reduce lift at speed, which is good for stability. Those wheel arch covers conceal wider tracks, while the springs, dampers and anti-roll bars are GP specific. The car sits 10mm closer to the road than the John Cooper Works. The 18-inch 4-spoke wheels are forged for lightness and wrapped in sticky Hankook track day tyres.
Basically, this is the most hardcore and most driver-focused factory Mini ever. The engine is a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo, good for 300 brake horsepower. That's a lot in a car this size. It's also a lot for just the front wheels to cope with. Mini says it'll hit 62 miles per hour in 5.2 seconds and run on to 164 miles an hour. Strangely, the gearbox is an 8-speed automatic. There's no manual option. It's also not a snappy dual clutch type transmission. It's just an automatic.
But there is a mechanical LSD to get the power down to the road. Just 3,000 GPs will be built, and only 575 of those are coming to the UK. It doesn't come cheap at just over £35,000. For that money, you could have the brilliant Toyota GR Yaris with the circuit pack, or a Honda Civic Type R. So the GP had better be special.
It's always a bit of a surprise to peer over your shoulder in this car and see that enormous red strut brace where normally you'd have the two little rear seats. Anyway, in the front of the cabin, I do like the seating position. I feel like I'm pretty low in the car. The steering wheel reaches out a long way, but I'm just not convinced by these seats, given this is supposed to be the most driver-focused Mini ever. They're not that supportive. I'd expect bigger bolsters just to clamp you in position. This panel over here, which is 3D printed, tells you that of the 3,000 cars, this one is number 25.
The GP comes in two flavours. The base car does without certain comfort and convenience features to save weight, claims Mini. You'll have to spend an extra £2,000 on the GP Touring Pack to get things like Apple CarPlay, wireless phone charging, dual-zone climate control, heated seats and sat-nav.
£2,000 is a lot of money, particularly on top of an already quite pricey car. This one does have the GP Touring Pack, which means you get the bigger digital display here, 8.8 inches across, and buried within it you've got lots of connected functions, things like real-time traffic and weather info. I also like the digital display that's right in front of the driver. It's really crisp and clear with things like gear position, engine speed, road speed. Although it's not quite lined up with the center of the steering wheel, it's slightly over to the left. We'll start with everyday driving impressions, and that means we have to talk about the ride because it's so firm. It's really tough. In town in particular, it feels rock solid and it tends to beat you up a little bit. It's better with speed. On the motorway, it's only jiggly. But in town, it is uncomfortable. I expected these tyres, these aggressive track day style Hankook tyres, to be all out of sorts on this greasy road that we've been driving on today, but actually they're okay. There's bundles of cornering grip, they're just traction limited.
What's the fastest Mini ever like when you break free of the city or motorway and find yourself on some winding country roads?
So it's still fun to drive the way a Mini should be, but then you've got this really tough ride quality. It does mean that body control is pretty much infinite. It does mean that it's got so much agility. The problem is, it doesn't really like a bumpy road at all. It just doesn't deal with bumps. They tend to thump through, and it just feels so tough and demanding. But with all that body control, with all that grip, and with all that performance, which we'll come on to in a moment, it is massively fast. That limited slip differential means that traction is really good, at least on a dry road, despite 300 horsepower. But because of all that power, because of the very stiff suspension, wide tyres, that LSD, you do tend to get lots of torque steer. You put your foot down and the steering wheel gets tugged around in your fingertips. It's quite dramatic.
With 302 brake horsepower, the Mini GP is seriously quick in a straight line, but the automatic gearbox seems ill-suited to such a focused car.
You've got these paddles on the steering wheel so you can change gear yourself. The trouble is, you don't ever get the same snappy response from the automatic gearbox that you do from every other corner of the car, so it's mismatched. You'll flick one of the paddles, counter beat, and then you feel the gear change. It's frustrating. You do long, not only for a sharper shifting gearbox in this car, but you long for a manual. I want a stick, a third pedal, and I want to change gear myself. Having said that, you can't fault the powertrain entirely because their engine is a monster. It's so strong. Foot down and the car just explodes forwards. Actually, it feels even stronger than 300 horsepower suggests. There's also a really fruity, quite vocal soundtrack. The engine is really good.
The fastest Mini so far is uncompromising and unyielding. On a typical bumpy British B-road, it often feels too uncompromising.
It's a wild ride, this Mini GP. It's so fast. At times it's really exciting. I'm sure on a very smooth road or a racetrack, it's good to drive, but it just isn't cut out for bumpier roads. The real problem with this car though is £35,000 puts it up against some of the best hot hatches of the modern era, the Civic Type R, the GI Yaris, and against those, it just doesn't really stack up. Thank you for watching this CarGurus video. Comment below, let us know what you think of the Mini GP. Also subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and check out cargurus.co.uk, which is where you'll find a great deal on your next used car from a top-rated dealer.